Hello, a very warm welcome to Fireside Chats. This is part 2 of Omnipotent, Omniscient and Not Omnipresent. We have found that the first episode or the first part of this topic was so riveting and had so much of information that we dare not close the subject in one episode. So Sister Denise, an experienced practitioner of Rajyoga Meditation, will be sharing her experience and knowledge on this fascinating titles of God in this episode. So thank you so much for joining us. Sister Denise, a very warm welcome back.
Thank you.
I must admit, when we came up with this title, I didn't realize that it was so rich, that there was so much to share. But one can't get enough, too much of God, can one?
God is vast.
God is vast. Okay, so I think I stopped you in mid-air at the end of our last episode where we spoke about God, the Omnipotent One. You shared that because of this aspect of God, he is misunderstood, but you also shared that he has the title for a reason. And that is in relation to his children.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that I think comes up is people, they look for proof. So they say, okay, if God is omnipotent, they use this word if, then he should do this, he should stop this war, etc. There's sort of shoulds. And so this is really a completely crazy use of logic, but people do have that very seriously. They will say, if God is omnipresent, then da 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 da, because their understanding of omnipotent is not really thought through, and it is maybe sometimes a little flippant or a little frivolous, and it's used against God, that, oh God, if you're omnipotent, then how did you let my child die? It's as if you say, okay, God is omnipotent, therefore he's responsible for everything that humans do. But that is not logical, you see. And this is because this word omnipotent is not at all clear. So I think that it has to be clarified what God has the power to do, and then we also need to look at, well, what does God actually do?
Okay, would you answer that question? Because that was on the tip of my tongue. Sister Denise, God has all of these titles because he is employed by life to do a job, isn't he? He's one doesn't have all of this power for no reason.
That's right.
What is the reason?
Well, God is known as the creator. So God definitely has the power to transform the world totally. And that means to transform all the souls and to transform the face of the earth. That's a huge power. And it is, transformation of the face of the earth is associated with cataclysmic change. And so God's connected with cataclysmic change in a causal way. So when people see cataclysmic change, which occurs very rarely, but it does occur, then they say this is an act of God, like huge storms, huge earthquakes, anything that is huge is considered to be a sign of God's power because it's so much bigger than human power. Power to destroy, you know what I mean? Now, God does not actually dictate to the wind and the water and say, okay, you can do some drama. But what God does do is cause humanity to be able to draw his power into themselves, which causes the impurity in the soul to be removed or extracted. Now, when that happens, that sets up all sorts of other things, and part of that is cataclysmic change. But of course, people can't figure that out so easily. They will just see cataclysm, it looks too big for a human act, it must be an act of God. So the capacity for people to make great leaps of logic is seemingly unlimited. And it's there, it's out there, and you can't really argue with it because people are in blind faith and superstition, and it's really very widespread. The proof of God is not something that can be understood so easily, especially not by someone whose thinking is very limited. And I think we would need to move away from the word proof of God to sign of God or indicator of God or something like this. The power of God to transform human thinking. Because you see, what God can do is communicate with humanity. I mean, there are beliefs about God to do with God speaking. The Gita, Shri Bhagwan Uvach, God speaks. In the Judeo-Christian religious background, in the beginning was the Word, and God was the Word. But what word is that? You know, in Greek they speak of, you know, logos. And so this communication of God to humanity is really saying to humanity, it's very nice what you all think, but it's totally erroneous. So what we need to do is sit down together and have a discussion. And so I think one of the wonderful things about God is the power to create a school where everyone's invited. That's a huge power.
It is.
You know?
A free school.
A free school. Mm. So you come, you sit down and you listen, and then you have to process it, practice it, write it down, think about it, you know, all of these things. So just the impact of the intelligence of God on human intelligence is extraordinary. And I think that is a great power. And it is said, you know, knowledge is power. Mm. So there is that side of the power of God, which people I don't think really think about.
We have to move on. I'd love to stay at this title, but we have to move on to the next one. We've covered omnipresent, not omnipresent. We covered omnipotent. Now let's move on to omniscient.
Yes.
What does God know that He wants us to know that He knows?
Well, you know, again, a person uses the expression God knows to refer to something that they don't know, or that nobody knows, or that cannot be figured out. So there is this feeling in people that God knows something that's outside the range of human knowledge. But then what sort of thing does God know? You know, I don't know where I left my keys. Where do you think they are? God knows. As if God would know all these little things. But I think that the omniscience of God has to do with knowing this huge cycle of creation. And in fact, it is sometimes said, if you can find anyone who knows the knowledge of the Creator and the creation, then call them for a discussion.
I like that.
Yes.
Yeah, that sits well.
And so, so you actually can't find that. And so this is really what God knows. God knows everything about Himself, herself, not in it. And all about the creation, how it came into being, how it proceeds, how it ceases to be, and how it gets recreated, how it gets transformed This is known only to God. Little things like who's going to pass their exams, you don't need God for that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or where did I lose something, or what's going to happen next. I mean, people want to know the future.
So Denise, I'm glad you mentioned an aspect, and I think this bugs a lot of people. Because of the confusion surrounding the Supreme Soul, it's almost as he's been taken out of the someone category and have become a thing. I think what you discussed under not omnipresent also falls in this, when you say this rock there or that fire, God is in that. So then he moves from being a living, animate personality, I hope I'm using the right words, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, to something. And I think if we categorize God into a thing and not a personality, we also shoot ourselves in the foot.
Well, you know, the problem is God is non-anthropomorphic, which means God is not a human. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that God is a thing, you see. It is said, you know, this word, the living God, is there. The intelligence, the one who speaks, the one who communicates. There's definitely someone, but not a human. But then there's people who say, well, you know, if God is not a human, then is an energy, you know, or it's the intelligence that makes, you know, butterflies' wings so beautiful and working so nicely, and all the different things of nature, how beautiful they are. This can only be created by the intelligence of God, you see. Whereas when God describes things, you know, God will say, you know, nature has its own energy. And people who look at the laws of matter, the laws of physics, and look at nature, they will see that there is this extraordinary inherent beauty and symmetry in nature. And then people think, well, somebody must have made it like that. It's very hard for people to think that it's like that by itself.
Yeah, and it
doesn't require God to do that.
It doesn't.
Well, no.
Okay.
People think that the proof of God is the wonder of nature, as if God is the one who created trees and water and gold and whatever. You know.
There are many who believe that God is Earth's architect.
Well, there is a saying that God is the architect of the world.
Is he?
Vishwakarma. Well, it's not so much the architect of the forest as the architect of human society when it is in perfect order. The word world, I mean, in Hindi you have a number of words that are translated as world. So you have dunya, you have srishti, you know. Actually, when God uses the word world, he's referring to the society, human society. And God does not need to act on matter or talk to frogs and cuckoos and, you know, eagles and deer, because, you know, all of the creatures of nature operate automatically. The only creatures who operate strangely are really humans, you know, and humans are the ones for whom the planet exists, and humans are the ones who are the trustees of the earth, and they've made a jolly well mess of it. And so, you know, if you were God, you wouldn't be talking to the dolphins or the ants. They're fine the way they are. You need to talk to the humans, you see. But people look at humans as just one more mammal. And sometimes, you know, the natural world is structured in different ways where you put humans at the top. But it might be perhaps better to put them further down the bottom. You know, I mean, it was said that if you get rid of all the insects, for which humans have plenty of plans with the pesticides, the world would be over in 10 years. But if you get rid of all the humans, the world would be absolutely pristine in 10 years. So it doesn't really need God to fix the earth, but it does need God to fix humanity. And the thing about humanity is the human soul is eternal and immortal. So what that also means is as long as there's been the planet, there have been humans living on it. Whereas the way that conventional science sees it is that human appeared at some point after the dinosaurs left, you know, and they're here, and well, where we headed is probably, you know, something like World War III, and if we do that, there's not going to be any World War IV. And what's the purpose of humanity in that scenario? It really doesn't have any kind of logic, you see. With God knowing what the earth is, the natural world, what is human society and who is who and what happens historically, and also is one of the, or the greatest actor who takes humanity in its hour of need, educates, purifies, carries home, resets. There you have a description of God which you wouldn't really find so easily in the world as we know it. It's really rather different.
Wow. Okay. So, Sister Denise, being aware of these three titles of God, how can the mere mortal, actually I don't like that term, how can his child relate to him, knowing all of these three accurately, like you just described?
There's another three titles that are really quite interesting if we juxtapose them with those three titles, and that is God the Father, God the Teacher, and God the Satguru, the true Guru, the one who brings everyone back to their original condition. That is really the function of the Satguru. The Father, the one who gives you your sense of identity, your inheritance, and raises you. The Teacher, the one who tells you everything there is to know, whatever is in the teacher's intellect and mind. And so I think the child has to also become the student and sit down, pay attention, and listen, you see. And so how do you listen to God? Well, you have to almost use your third ear. We talk about the third eye, with which you see things that are not visible to the two eyes. And a third ear would be where you can hear things that are not what is said in the world.
I'm wondering whether there's a third nose, but we'll talk about that at some other stage.
Second one.
Yes, okay. So the third ear, yeah? Sorry, I interrupted you. To hear that which is not understood and not known by the world.
Right, because the people of the world know things in two ways. One way that people know things is that it's passed down from the ancestors. Mm. And the other way you know things is by exploration and investigation, which is really the scientific way of knowing things. And things that are passed down by the ancestors correspond to the ancient ways and traditions and that sort of thing. So, the people of the world today have both of these going on, and that's fine, but what God is going to say to you is neither what comes from the ancestors nor what you can glean from investigating the earth. So you have to turn your attention away from anything to do with the earth and the world history and turn your attention to God and say, I'm listening. How does God communicate to humanity? Well, we are souls, we communicate through our bodies. God doesn't have a body, God will need to communicate through a body. Then what you have to look at is what is being said, you know. And the main thing that God said is, look, you know what? You're a soul, not a body. And then you say, okay, what are the implications? Well, first implication is you've always existed as you. What are the implications of that? You have passed through all the changes that have happened in the world. And what are the implications of that? Where are you in the process of change? And that is, you are at a point of maximum ignorance about matters of what is known to God. You have gone against the laws of karma, and so consequently you have really made a big mess. That is the time when you need God to teach you that again. And that is really this period of time where one world cycle changes to another. You know, you have to kind of put aside the arrogance of intellect and say, you know, God, we don't know.
Yes, Denise, what comes to mind as you speak is, I think people should ask the question of themselves is, whatever I thought I know about God, how is it working for me?
Yes, good question.
Yeah, so that's what I gleaned from what you just said. Where do we go from here?
Okay, I'm a soul. What do I have to do? So God will say, okay, you are completely at the lowest level of your personal spiritual power. You're very weak, and this is why you do actions against your own best interests, against your own conscience. And so what you need is to take power.
It appears that God is a diagnostician for the soul.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
sometimes God is called the supreme surgeon.
Okay, and part of that vocation is to make a diagnosis.
And to give the medicine.
And the medicine is?
It's that kind of medicine, you know, one is medicine that you take certain medicines, certain drugs, certain herbs, whatever it is, but along with that, you know, don't drive while you're taking this medicine, don't eat this and this and this while you're so there's sort of what's called pares, these restrictions, you know, like some medicines, don't eat grapefruit if you have this medicine.
Keep out of reach of children.
Yeah, this sort of thing. So, I mean, you know, and then people say, well, you've got to diet, you've got to exercise, you know, so you've got all these precautions. And I think that God is saying, well, you know, what you have to do is do some lifestyle changes. You need to meditate. You need to take power. You need to really take a look at what you're doing. You need to study, and you need to practice these concepts and bring them into your lives. And then you will see that the illness of human suffering is going to be alleviated dramatically.
I can sit here, and the viewer can sit here and listen to you for the next 3 days, but we have a time constraint. So, Sister Denise, you shared a lot of data that the soul, I think, is hungry for. There are many who are listening to you who are lapping this up because the human spirit is so hungry for something that's real. The heart. Human heart, does it have the ability to recognize God and hear all of this and think, yeah, this is you. It's finally you. We have that ability?
Of course
because,
we do.
Sister Denise, you see, the world is so filled with fakes. The world is so filled with parts that offer promise but don't deliver.
You know this French expression, le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît pas.
No, not quite. No, I'm not
The
familiar with it.
heart has the reasons which reason doesn't know about.
That's beautiful. Hey, 10 out of 10 to the French. Okay, so link that with the divine.
I think that, you know, in your heart, even without knowing, there is this deep attraction to God, which is what you were talking about. And when you see that the heart will know, and also, you know, God will give instructions which if anybody else would give, you'd say, excuse me, I'm not going to do that. But because it's God, so I'll do it.
Okay, we have to end on it. That's a cliffhanger on which to end. And thank you. So there you go. I'm so flabbergasted. I actually don't know how to say goodbye to you. But this has been so rich and so fulfilling. And with a lot of what Sister Denise shared, it's not about the words, it's about the experience. And I so hope that you were focusing on her eyes as she spoke, because it seems as if God's love is flowing through that to, you at home watching right now. So understanding God is very much a head thing, but also recognizing Him is a heart thing. And I love the note in which Sister Denise ended today's episode by saying there's something in your heart that is attracted to God, and conversely, there's something in God's heart that attracts you. So do make sure that you remove the ego and present yourself to God for what can only be a fulfilling and meaningful relationship. So I do wish you everything of the best on your spiritual quest, and thank you so much for joining us this half hour. Take care and goodbye.